You know, when you think of the great empires of history, names like Rome or Persia or the Mongols, they're probably the first ones that pop into your head. But what if I told you that some of the most powerful, most technologically advanced empires have been almost completely written out of the story? Today, we're digging into a lost chapter of world history.
And it's a really good question, right? We're talking about empires that controlled huge stretches of the ocean, that commanded these massive, powerful fleets, and that really did shape the world we live in today. And yet, for so many of us, their names, their stories, they're a total blank. So why is that?
And look, this wasn't just some accident of history. One of our sources puts it perfectly. The achievements of these peoples have been marginalized, misunderstood, or altogether erased. It's like a historical shadow was cast over them on purpose. Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain.
All right, so our journey here starts out on the high seas, because the empires from this part of the world were absolute masters of the ocean. And at the very heart of their story is this legendary ship, a vessel so advanced that for centuries people have argued about whether it even existed. Many just claimed it was a myth, or even worse, just a cheap copy.
Meet the Jung. This ship was the absolute powerhouse of the southern seas. But its story got so tangled up with its famous competitor, the Chinese junk, that its own incredible, unique history got lost. So let's set the record straight right now.
The Jong was built using a completely different tradition. Forget nails, it used sewn planks. It had 2 rudders, not 1, which gave it way better control. And get this, its hull had multiple layers of wood, making it unbelievably tough against cannon fire and stormy seas. But here's the real shocker. The word junk, which we all associate with Chinese ships, actually comes from the Malay word jong. Yeah, the name itself was borrowed.
Okay, so you've got these incredible ships. What kind of power does that get you? Well, it creates empires of the sea. These were states that didn't measure their power by land, but by their control of the water itself. And our first great example is the empire of Srivijaya. Now, before we get any further, we gotta wrap our heads around this key idea, thalassocracy. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's simple. Unlike an empire that marches armies across land, a thalassocracy uses its navy to control trade routes, ports, and islands. Its highways are the oceans.
And Srivijaya was the real deal. By the year 683 AD, what do you think this number is? Any guesses? That was the size of the armed forces its ruler had at his command, 20,000, a truly formidable power for its time. But who were these warriors?
They were called the Orang Laut, which literally translates to the sea people. And that name is no joke. These weren't just soldiers who happened to be on ships. Their entire culture, their whole way of life was tied to the sea. They were the engine that powered Srivijaya's dominance.
I mean, these guys were the stuff of legends. As the ancestors of the region's sea nomads, their skills on the water were just second to none. But they were also ferocious fighters, famous for the pure, shocking speed and ferocity of their attacks. They were the absolute backbone of the empire, enforcing its will all across the waterways.
But, controlling the sea can only get you so far. The greatest of these empires figured out how to combine that mastery of the waves with an unbreakable core on land. And that brings us to, well, arguably the heavyweight champion of them all, the Empire of Majapahit.
So, how do you make an entrance on the world stage? A real entrance? Well, in 1293, Majapahit did it by defeating the one army nobody could seem to beat, the Mongol invasion force of Kublai Khan. Think about that. At a time when the Mongols were just rolling over entire continents, Majapahit stopped them cold. This wasn't just a win, no, this was a message to the entire planet.
And their strength wasn't just about clever tactics or having bigger ships. At the very heart of what made a Majapahit warrior so formidable was a deep martial and spiritual practice known as Pencak Silat. This was their secret weapon.
See, Pencak Silat, it was so much more than just a way to fight. It was a complete system for creating the perfect warrior. It built incredible physical skill, for sure, but just as important, it forged this core of loyalty, iron discipline, and spiritual toughness that basically held the whole empire together. It was a cultural treasure and a strategic weapon all in one. So with this incredible foundation of sea power and martial discipline, Majapahit was ready for greatness. And at its absolute peak, one man's incredible ambition was about to push this empire into overdrive.
His name was Gajah Mada.
Now, he wasn't the king, but as prime minister, man, he was the architect of Majapahit's destiny. He had this singular, powerful vision to unite the entire archipelago, the Nusantara, under a single banner, and he sealed that vision with a solemn oath.
This is the Palapa Oath. Gajah Mada swore he wouldn't eat any food with spices, which back then was like giving up all the best things in life, until he had conquered every single one of the places he listed. It's just an unbelievable declaration of ambition, naming territories from one end of the known world to the other.
And the craziest part? He actually pulled it off. Under Gajah Mada, Majapahit's influence exploded to cover the areas of modern-day Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and way, way beyond. This was their golden age, an empire stretching across one of the most vital maritime crossroads on the entire planet.
This symbol, the Surya Majapahit, it really represents the empire at its absolute peak. It's a diagram of the cosmos and the gods, a powerful statement that put Majapahit at the very center of the universe. This is how they saw their place in the world, right at the heart of it all.
But of course, no golden age lasts forever. So what happened to this incredible empire, Majapahit, and what's left of its legacy today?
Well, the end didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one big battle. It was more like a slow unraveling. It started with the death of their great king in 1389, which led to a lot of infighting. At the same time, new powers, these rising Islamic sultanates, started challenging their control of trade, chipping away at their power until, finally, the capital city fell.
But here's the really important part. The empire, as a political thing, yeah, it fell apart. But the culture, the spirit, oh, that didn't die. Artists, priests, and nobles fled to the island of Bali, and they took it all with them. They preserved the art, the religion, the entire spirit of Majapahit, and that legacy is still alive and thriving there today.
And that kind of brings us full circle, doesn't it? The story of Srivijaya and Majapahit is this incredible reminder that the history we think we know is often just incomplete. It really makes you wonder if an empire that could defeat the Mongols and rule the seas could be so easily overlooked, what other amazing stories are still out there, just waiting for us to find them.